Celeb Savant is a career retrospective type interview focusing on singers, actors, and industry experts. Join Barrett Edelstein now as he dives into the entertainment world.
British singer, songwriter and theatre performer Sean Smith has been performing professionally since the age of 7, appearing alongside Marty Webb in Evita and Brian Blessed in The Wizard of Oz. He has appeared in numerous pantomimes and his stage roles include tours of Dancing Queen, Spirit of Broadway, Elvis, the King of Rock and Roll, That's Entertainment and We Will Rock You. Sean rose to national prominence as one half of Same Difference with his sister Sarah. The duo were finalists on the X Factor Series 4 and were mentored by Simon Cowell. The duo finished third out of 250,000 applicants before signing with Psycho Music. Total Same Difference sales exceed over 300,000 units. Since 2016, Sean has consistently released new music, albums, EPs and singles. His latest EP, Stay Human, was released in February of 2026. Up next on Celeb Savant, we've got Sean Smith. Where in the world are you and how are you doing?
At the moment, I'm in the UK. I'm home for a while. I live in Portsmouth, which is right down the south of the UK. And things are going great. Really, really loving it. The sun's starting to shine here, which is unusual in the UK. It's coming into spring, which is UK can be beautiful in the spring. So I'm just trying to enjoy it.
Let's rewind. At what age, whether as a child or teenager, did you think, okay, I want to be in this music world, and how did that journey progress?
I think it all started when I was in school, actually. I always wanted to be a footballer growing up. I was sent to things like, usual boy stuff like karate, martial arts, footballs. I was always sent to do that kind of thing. And slowly but surely, I just started to realize that I had a bit of a flair for performance and I had a good singing voice. So it just kind of flowed from there. I think the very first time it ever started, there was a school teacher in my secondary school who just said, look, we'd love you to come along to our choir. And at the time I was like, oh, way too cool for choir. I ended up giving in because I thought it would get me some brownie points with the teachers. And the very first time I realised that I had something, we performed the choir, but we performed it backwards to the school. So all the school were watching. We were doing it as if it was just a rehearsal with our backs to the audience. I was like the lead singer of this little performance that we were doing. And everyone was like, who was that singer? They were really good. They were really good. Who was it singer? And this vibe was going around the whole school. And once people got wind that it was me, all of a sudden, I was getting so many compliments and it just gave me this confidence. I realized that there was something in it and just leaned into it. And before I knew it, I was really hooked on it and I was part of that world.
Okay, so now once you were hooked and part of the world, what were the next steps to becoming professional?
Well, from then on, I was just obsessed with it. I came out of school and rather than going into education like most kids would, I went straight off to Scotland to be in like a boy-girl band. And we stayed in like student halls and had an amazing time recording an album and stuff. And just kind of left that to see how that would go. There was a really good manager who had other artists within the musical world. He had 2 bands at the time. One of them really took off, and that unfortunately wasn't us. So then I kind of realized, right, I've got to go and get a job in this world if I want to take it seriously. Went for my first audition for a cruise ship back then and got it. That kind of like set me off on a professional world. I was so raw, I never really knew what I was doing. I had a little bit of dancing ability, a little bit of singing ability, but that really was my training. And they say an ounce of doing is like a pound of theorizing. And that was so true because as soon as I got that job, I was thrown in the deep end and just had to kick and swim and grew so quickly in that time. I'd say I did two contracts like that and then thought to myself, I'm ready to step out into a big wide world after that and started doing touring shows. And the next minute I was standing in a queue for the X Factor Series 4. And that's where my career just took off overnight, basically. Took me to a whole new level. And yeah, did that for about 10 years, I'd say, kind of making the most of our journey from the X Factor times, and then moved into musical theatre after that. But obviously, along the way, I've always been writing and trying to build myself up. It was a slow process learning on the job, but I think the beautiful thing about that was the fact that you were raw. You weren't kind of like every other kid that came out of a performing arts college. And so I stood out because I had a slightly different learned style rather than a perfected style that you would get from going into a performing arts school. It was a completely different path, but one that really held me in good stead as I've been going through my career.
Couple of beats back. So the X Factor journey, was it as a solo artist that you did X Factor?
It wasn't. I was in a band called Same Difference. There's a weird story there. So I went up for X Factor as a solo artist. And while I was stood in the queue, my sister came along to just support me on the day. They absolutely loved her. And they were like filming her while we were in the line. She did go down the route of going to a performing arts school. She went to Atelier Conti, which is quite a big name one in London. She just had a little bit of time off college and she came to support me. And because she was so full of energy and she was around those kind of people all the time that lifted her up, and she was smiley, happy, she was in great shape because she'd been dancing every single day. The cameras just loved her. And once they started talking to her and interviewing her, she said, "Oh, I'm not actually here to audition. I'm here to support my brother." After that, they said, "Well, why don't you audition today?" She agreed because she obviously got the buzz while she was there. And they saw us both separately and said no. And then they took us outside. The producers came to us and said, "Would you think about going for the show as a group instead?" And we thought we'd do whatever it takes to make this happen. So went for it wholeheartedly, and the rest is history. We ended up that series getting all the way to the final, coming third, got legions of fans. After that, we got signed to Simon Cowell's record label, which was the biggest in the world at the time, and had a gold selling album. And it just all took off pretty much in the blink of an eye overnight for us.
So you were working with your sister in Same Difference for 10 years, correct? After that process?
Yes. So it's actually 7 years, I tell a lie, because in 2007 was when we formed. And then 2014, at the very end of the year, was when we kind of went, right, for this year, we're just going to take it our separate ways. And there was so many amazing things that we achieved in that time, but it just felt like the right time because obviously working with your sibling, you know, when we were growing up, we were always fighting like cats and dogs, like any brother and sister. Obviously, there was a love and family tie there, but that was quite a natural thing that happened with us. And when we started working together and living out of each other's pockets, that obviously heightened. I think that, and obviously, she's her own person, I'm my own person, and we wanted things to go in different ways. And it got to a point where we weren't necessarily swimming in the same direction. I have thoughts about that now that we've retired from that, where I wish actually I kind of leaned into what we were more, which was more created by my sister. But obviously, as you're growing up, you're getting frustrated. You have your usual feelings as your own person. And I didn't realize that at the time. And I was trying to take us in a different direction. So yeah, it was a beautiful time, but it was the right time to call it a day, I think, when we did, definitely.
What part of the X Factor experience surprised you in the sense that you didn't think it would be part of the experience, but it was?
I think the overriding feeling that I have is that primarily it's a TV show. And I went into it not understanding that. I was just, naive, young, bright-eyed young lads who just wanted to do whatever it took to make the most of, the talent that I found. And certain stories, like, for example, you'd have the sort of producer people chatting to you in a way that would lead you in a certain direction to make good TV. And you didn't realize that was happening. But I saw a few things that made me realize that that was what was happening. And it was kind of like one of those things, you either sink or swim. You either go along with the vibe that they want from you and embrace it with all its worth. And it kind of ticks the box for what they need from you for the TV show, or you went against it and it seems that the next minute you were out of the show. So I didn't realize how primarily it was made for good TV rather than being like a traditional talent show that you thought it would be. Luckily, the way that they were trying to perceive us wasn't necessarily bad. So it was quite easy to enjoy it and just go along for the ride and get swept along by the way that we were being manipulated. But I think for other people, they found great difficulty in that because they know that it's not necessarily who they are. And it was difficult for them to go along with it at times.
You referenced that you've been doing musical theatre. So what productions have you been in, and tell us about your theatre experience?
Oh, I've been doing it for years. I guess the one that I'm most proud of, like the biggest name one, is probably We Will Rock You, the Queen and Ben Elton musical. It was a huge hit here in the UK. I'm not sure how big it ended up in South Africa, but I'm sure you've probably at least heard of it.
Yeah, no, it's been here in a few iterations, maybe 3 or 4 times, and it was very popular.
I was directed by the original director from that, which was an absolute honor. That again took me to a whole other level of performance because, growing up, I was kind of doing things on a wing, just making it work the best way that I thought I could. But this director really leaned into sort of every line and the weight of every line and feeling behind everything. And it really helped me to develop as a performer. I absolutely loved that show. I think the part that I played was called Britney Spears. He's like this big, larger-than-life bohemian leader. I love the fact that I can get on stage and just completely lose my inhibitions in that. And the music of Queen is obviously iconic. So it was incredible to be able to do those songs with hand-selected band members from Brian May. And yeah, just absolutely loved my time in that show. I've been touring for years in different shows. I did Putting on the Ritz, I did That's Entertainment, Dancing Queen. I was part of that. I did Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, playing Pharaoh. So yeah, lots of different roles, lots of different things to sink my teeth into and learn and grow throughout this journey.
Okay, so now this is an interesting discussion because I remember when Glee came on, Leah Michelle being very much a Broadway performer on theatre, and they wanted her to sing pop songs. Where I remember hearing at the interview where Ryan Murphy or the other guy who was a music director, I can't remember his name right now, said that they were struggling because the way theatre performers sing is very different to how pop people sing in the pop world. So how have you navigated that? Have you found it challenging differentiating between the pop and the theatre performances, or is it now secondhand?
I think that you have to be a bit of a chameleon. You have to kind of change yourself for the job at hand. And I've had to do that a hell of a lot throughout my career. But luckily, when I was growing up, I loved all kinds of music. So all these influences, I can understand how to tap into it and just make myself right for the job at hand. Yes, you're absolutely right. With pop music, for example, you wouldn't put any vibrato on. You need to sound a little bit different. You need to have your own style that people can latch onto, that they know is your sound. Whereas in musical theatre, they're expecting people to kind of jump into the track that they are and kind of almost be like similar to how it was originally. That's the way you're directed and that's the way you're told to sing. Luckily, We Will Rock You is written around, it's obviously rock music, but because it's not classic musical theatre, I don't necessarily have to change an awful lot for that. I mean, I grew up listening to Meatloaf, John Bon Jovi, so the rock stuff comes relatively naturally to me. I can do like legit musical theatre, and I've been up for a few roles for that, but it doesn't come necessarily as natural to me. And I think when I walk into the audition room for genuinely legit musical theatre stuff, I think they can hear that I'm a little bit of a pretender in comparison to those who have had proper classical musical theatre training. So sometimes that can be a bit of a double-edged sword for me. Well, because I'm kind of like a jack of all trades, but really sometimes people get known for one, and that's what gives them their fame. And I can't think of the word. Just something to latch onto, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, but I don't find it that difficult in answer to your question. I can see there are a lot of people that are in Broadway, West End musical theatre that would struggle to cross over. It was weird actually, because when I first went into the X Factor, I probably was a little bit too musical theatre because that had been my background. So during that time, I had to kind of relearn how to be a pop singer. And yeah, that was something that the vocal director on the show really worked on with me. That was a big help, but it also helped me to understand the differences. But also, like I said to you before, the fact that I never went in and had specific trainer, I think has been a big help in that sphere.
Just going back to what you said about being a jack of all trades, these days I think it's important to do that, especially in the entertainment world, with how much digital plays artists, they need to be find other avenues and all that kind of stuff. Don't put yourself down for being a jack of all trades. Let that be your roar of achievement, so to speak.
No, I absolutely agree with what you just said there, by the way. Not now, as an artist, not only do you need to understand the equipment that you're using to write and record, you need to have a good creative brain. You need all that kind of creativity. But on the opposite side, you also need to be a marketing genius. You need to understand the thoughts and feelings of the general person and what they want and what they want to tap into. You also need to do all of that without losing who you are, because if people can spot a fraud, then you'll be dead in the water before you've even started. It's a fine line, and you've got to kind of know everything. I know a lot of the smartest business brains out there would say to you, well, hire somebody to do that. But you also think to yourself, well, yeah, I understand that you're saying that, but we're in this business also as our business. I wouldn't say I'm at that level where money's so easily arriving that you can afford to hire all the best in all these different spheres. Again, just like all of my life, I've kind of gone, just do it, just work it and learn by your mistakes and grow as you go. And I'm really proud of myself for that, because it's been a lot off my own back.
Okay, so let's now go to music. Tell us, how do you create a song?
Oh, it's been done in many different ways for me over the years. When I first started out, it was completely different to now. So back then, when I was in Same Difference, we were such a major label that they did have the power to do what we were just talking about, which was they had money to throw at it to give you the best in the world across all the different spheres. And back then it was just, we listened to demos, we said we liked them, and then they hooked us up with incredible producers all over the world. And we just flew to them, went into the studio and put our vocals down. And then when the songs came back, we gave a little bit of feedback from our point of view, but sometimes it would be taken on, sometimes it wouldn't, because obviously you're part of a much bigger machine. All you could do in that time was just go in there and deliver the very best performance that you possibly could. And to be honest with you, I absolutely love working in that way. It takes a lot of the pressure away from it. But you don't feel like it's got you all over it. It feels a little bit more manufactured. Throughout my career, when I first turned solo, it worked in a similar way where I get sent demos, but I had a lot more choice in the matter. So I would say, I absolutely love this song. The record label, who by that point may go on a smaller budget, would go and do a deal on the song. Again, hook me up with a producer, which again, I had more choice in the matter at that point. And it would work in a similar way, but sometimes it would even be remotely. So I'd literally record the vocals here and then just send them off so they could drop them in the project and work it from there. So that was another good way of working. But for my latest album, say album, it's actually an EP, Stay Human, there was a really good story where I'd bought a new laptop in order to start thinking about making some new records. And I walked into a coffee shop in Alaska, and the guy who was the lighting guy on We Will Rock You, he was sat there with the same laptop. And I said, "Oh, I've just bought the same laptop as you." And he said, "What do you want to use it for?" And I said, to make music. And he said, oh, I do the same. I'm a producer. And it was just like two minds meeting, and we just worked off of each other so well. And in that way of working, he would sort of send me a track that he'd been working on musically, and I'd then write the top line. I'd then record the top line, and then we'd get together to sort of, I'll call it dotting the I's and crossing the T's, to produce it to the highest level that we possibly could within the scope of what we had to work with. So I love working in all ways, but what I will say is when you're putting your music out that you've had a say in along every part of the road, you feel a lot more close to it. So there's a lot more hope that it lands and people love it, because you know that it's truly who you are. And you get a lot more satisfaction from hearing great things about work that you've really worked on from the start to finish.
So tell us the inspiration behind the latest EP. What was the thing to say, okay, well, I want to now create it? What inspired those songs?
A lot of different things, in all honesty. And this is one thing about this EP that maybe isn't going along the lines of what I've done before, is that there's lots of different styles within it, all of which I absolutely love. I'm not a person that's just like a sucker for one style and I'll live and die by that style. I'm someone that's like, if it's working and I'm feeling it, then let's roll with it. And that's exactly what happened with this EP. So going through a couple of the songs, there's one on there called Flower in a Book. Now that was actually, again, a completely different way of working, because we used to get sent demos all the time, as I mentioned. And back in the same difference days, we were working on a third album. It never ended up getting released. And there was a demo that I always thought, oh, there's something in this song. It's really lovely, but it never actually had any words. The demo singer had just kind of put it down going, na, 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 na. So I had to actually write the words to it. But that song in particular, we took the old demo, we worked out what the chords were that made them slightly minor so that it wasn't so cheesy. It had a very sort of like 2008 simple chord progression that we kind of made a little bit more minor to make it more dancey. Yeah, so we did that. Because it was written of that time, I decided to write it about my X Factor journey and my feelings around my sister. The second one, Placebo. Now this one was again a little bit different. He said, I want you to go down a certain cool dance style that I like. And he sent me the original track that I ended up writing a top line on. He gave me the word. He said, I think for this song, you need to write about the word placebo. And with that, I just thought, well, what is a placebo? Worked out how to make that fit into a song and came up with the premise of the idea off the back of that one word. So that was a fun way of working. He gave me a flavor and I just ran with it. There's another one called Purpose, which was just genuine feelings to that time. When you're doing 7-8 shows a week and you're just doing it constantly, it can be overwhelming, tiring. And it got to a point where I was just over it and wondering what was next and what my new purpose would be. Again, he sent me a track that he had been working on, and I wrote around my feeling that was in that moment. And they always say, write about what you know. So it actually helps the creativity to come to you, because it's actually what you're feeling in that moment and it's dominating your thoughts. So it's easy to get those thoughts onto paper when you're right there in it. That worked in that way. There's one called Sunrise on there. And at the time it was very summery. We were in the Caribbean and there was like beautiful weather. And I was constantly hearing that kind of Caribbean feeling sound on the beach and stuff like that. So a track was written around that sort of style because that was the vibe that we were in. And at the time I was just really missing my family, missing my wife at home. And again, that was something that was dominating my thoughts. So it was easy to get that down onto paper.
For the listener who does not know, what is a top line?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So a top line is the lyrics and the actual notes that are sang. And so the top line is always the artist is singing it, or perhaps the top line, if it was a musician playing it, it's the sort of dominant sound that you can hear on a song. So it would be the words and the lyrics and the performance that you with most songs. Then you stack like maybe some harmonies on there, and then you've got your hooks that maybe happen with the musical instruments. Music can be created in any way. That's the beauty of it. But yeah, that's what the top line is. It's the dominant line that you can hear that goes through the song. And usually, as I say, it would be the artist or the singer that will provide that top line.
I love me a CD. I still budget for my CDs every month. For me, it's a thank you to you guys for all the hard work that you're doing. I love the journey of the choice, the unpacking, the booklets, the listening to song from 1 to whatever number, that full journey. I'm unsure if you are or not aware, there's a massive uptick of physical around the world. About 2 years ago in the UK, 5.9 million vinyls sold, the biggest since 1990. Last year in the UK as well, there's a basket of products that they gauge exchanges on. And based on these exchanges, which there needs to be a high number every day, they monitor it for tax purposes. Because of the upsurge of CDs again, CDs are now back in that basket. And the research is showing it's the teenagers, it's the kids, the younger kids diving into this world, not necessarily the older nostalgic people. Then we have Spotify and the DSPs that people consume music on. What are your observations of the landscape at the moment?
I agree with you. I absolutely love CDs. I think CD would be my choice. Okay, I'll tell you a story. I used to walk into Woolworths when I was a little kid, which was kind of like a nickel and dime store that we have here in the UK. I guess you probably had something like that in South Africa. And they became less popular because obviously they weren't able to do business in the way that things move forward. But to me, success was getting a CD on the shelf in one of those stores. HMV, Woolworths, Virgin Records. I used to live and die in there when I was young. Similar to what you were saying, I would save my pocket money. I'd only have enough money for one CD, and I'd have a wall of songs. I'd look up and I'd go, I love that one, I love that one, I love that one. But when I bought it, it meant the world to me. I couldn't wait to get home, play it, and I would play these songs to death. And if these CDs had, like, I don't know, the dance moves in them, or they had the lyrics, I would learn them and I would perform it, and I would just pretend that I was my favorite artist. And it's what made me fall in love with music. And I just think nowadays, with the whole, you've got to hook the listener within 30 seconds, otherwise people will just skip to the next song. It's made things a hell of a lot more difficult. Now, I was really lucky. When I first came on the scene, CDs was still a big thing, but they were just about to die out and I didn't realize it. So when our CD was finally on the shelf, I felt like I'd made it in my world, because that was what success meant to me. So to see my CD up on the shelf in the middle of Christmas in the top 10, it was just, I've made it. It was just tick box. That was what I deemed as success. But very, very quickly it changed. And it was 2008 in the crash when it all changed and went digital, and they started monetizing everything digital. It went to more, you knew what was going to be in the top 40 by what was the top 40 on the iTunes store, so it changed to that. And then it changed again when it moved to platforms. Then, the ones that were getting the most plays on these platforms, it was more than likely that they were going to be your official top 40. So in answer to your question, I am mindful of it, because I do think when I'm writing, I need to hook very, very quickly so that we don't get skip. And I think that it's a shame, because a lot of the music that I absolutely adored was like a slow burner. For example, a perfect example of that is I'd Do Anything for Love, Meatloaf. When I was young, I absolutely loved that song, but the vocal doesn't start until about a minute and a half into the song. Nowadays they go, okay, where's this going? Oh, we're hearing this for too long. Oh, the first minute's gone, skip. I don't know that for sure, because obviously it's legendary, and you don't know what would happen to that record if it came out today. It might still stand up to the test of time. But what I do know is people are thinking differently about the way they're writing a recording now in order to suit the changes in the market. For example, 2-minute songs have become a thing. Sometimes they're doing even 1.5-minute songs. So at least 30 seconds in, they're stacking up the play and they've already got to the heart of the song so that people don't skip. I guess artists and just people in general are just adapting and changing to the world that they find themselves in. And I've had to be exactly the same.
I know if I had to ask you this question today, tomorrow, or the next day, I know your answer will be different every time. I'm not saying favorite, I'm saying top of mind. If once we finish this conversation, you went to push play to 5 other artists, who would those artists be?
Teddy Swims, Justin Bieber, Jess Glynn, Becky Hill, Somba.
Sean, the podcast is listened to throughout the world. As a final message, what would you like to say?
In a general way, keep spreading love, keep enjoying music, find the soul of it, find what you love, and have a little bit of joy from it in your life. Why not?
Thank you for listening to this episode of Celeb Savant. Please follow Barrett on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at Celeb Savant. That's CelebSavant.